I want to talk to you today about competition and compassion. And what better example do we have to illustrate that than the gospel message today, in which the disciples behave in a less than attractive manner once again. And I'm really, really happy that they do it because it makes me feel glad to be in the company of the people who were closest to Christ and who look just like me. So, to give you more of a setting of the really appalling request that James and John make of Jesus, Jesus has just for the third time, this is now the third time in the Gospel Mark, told them that he is going to be hauled up before the authorities and he is going to be killed, just as we heard it prophesied in the book of Isaiah, that for nothing, for our infirmities, he is going to be killed. And pretty much right after he says that, James and John say, when you get there, we want to be on your right and your left. Now, I was trying to think of an equivalent for this. An equivalent would be like a parent saying to her adult children, the doctor says I have 1 month to live, and the two oldest say, we want the master bedroom when you die. That's how appalling it is. But it's also appalling because James and John think they're the favorites. They were one of the first two called, and they get to go with Peter up onto the mountaintop. They get this sense that they're the favorite disciples, and so they want to lock in reserved seats before anybody else in heaven with Jesus. Thing is, those seats are getting pretty crowded because in the book of Revelation, God is there, if we're talking about chairs in heaven, and Jesus is on his right side. So if somebody's going to be in Jesus' left, he's going to be in between Jesus and God. That's not going to work. And also, Jesus has promised it to the convict on the cross already. You will be next to me in paradise today. So really, where's the room for them in heaven? My picture of heaven is that there's no preferential seating. And I get that picture from Jesus because if you think of any encounter he had with anybody, from a Roman centurion to a person who was considered one of the more sinful tax collectors or prostitutes, that he treated everybody alike. Nobody was considered more saved, holier than anybody else, right? So I don't get the sense of ranked seating in heaven, nor do I get the sense that any of us would be bothered if we were not sitting right next to Jesus, that somehow in the heavenly choir we're going to be happy with the altos or the baritones, right? We'll be okay. But let's get back to their problem. Their problem is their ego. They want to be the best disciples, known as the best disciples, the closest to Jesus. And then the other 10, what happens? Rise up in righteous indignation. How dare you approach our Lord and Savior and ask him to be the favorite disciples? Well, now they're guilty of the same thing they just accused the others of, wanting to be special. The problem is the human ego, which we all have. And this is separate from our human self, our best self that we were born with, the self that is the child of God, that is perfect and beautiful in every way. There's another thing that all human beings have, and I have to think that God gave us it for some sort of self-preservation, but it is our ego, and it is the thing that causes us to want power and lordship over others, to have me victorious over all others. I have to get past that green light faster than the person in the lane next to me. I have to get the best seat at the baseball game. I have to get the raise. I have to be the soloist at Christmas. I have to. It's endemic. We can't avoid it. And so this is why I appreciate the story today, because it shows that the first people that Jesus picked to follow, and the people who sat at his feet and ate with him and slept with him every single day, are just as prone to this. And notice Jesus' reaction. Compassion. They're competing to be the best human being, and he is responding with complete compassion. Right? He says, you don't know what you're asking. He doesn't say I don't hear it in a nasty way. You fools, you don't know what you're asking. It's more like, I don't think you really know what you're talking about. And then he says, do you really want to drink what I'm drinking here? Do you really want that cup of sorrow and suffering? Do you want the baptism that I'm going to have? I'm going to die to this world and be reborn in a way that people recognize as God rising from the dead. Do you really want that? And he knows that they don't understand. And we don't fully understand, even with our perspective 2,000 odd years later. He knows that, and so he responds with compassion at the human condition that struggles with wanting to be valued and loved more because we don't perceive that we are already fully valued and loved. So while I was thinking about these passages, I was looking at these two books, which I brought for you. One from the Christian tradition, one from the Buddhist tradition. This one is called Open Mind, Open Heart. It's about being more open-minded and open-hearted, i.e. compassionate. And this one called Start Where You Are, A Guide to Compassionate Living. This one is by the great monk Thomas Keating, the expert on centering prayer. This is by Pema Chodron, who for me really helps me understand the Gospels very well. And they both talk about the ego and how it gets in our way. And they talk about ways that we can defeat what's going on, that power, that poison in the world. They call it poison. The Christian word might be sin. The poison in the world that does this to us. That thing that somebody said to us 2 months ago that we're still spinning about. The thing that somebody did to us 10 years that we're still bothered about. The thing that we did to somebody 10 years ago that we're still bothered about. The thing our father said 55 years ago that we're still bothered about. All those things they would call poison, still coming into our lives and causing us suffering. Or when we act out in a way about it, causes suffering to others. So then we just keep this cycle of sin or suffering going forward. And what they both say is that the way out of this is to have compassion for ourselves, to have compassion for our human condition, that we look just like James and John and the other 10, and that's fine. It's not fine that we act that way, but it's fine that we are that way. And as long as we can have compassion for that moment when we tried to, be the top best remember, I'm not sure what it would be the equivalent for us, the best senior warden ever. When we recognize that and we say, there's me wanting to be the best senior warden ever again. I'm looking at all these senior wardens and going, I'm not talking about you, I'm really not. When we do that and we can have compassion and say, there's that ego thing coming again. That's just the ego thing. We can be light with ourselves. And as we just say, I breathe compassion out to the world. I send this compassion that I'm feeling towards myself out towards the world. We suffer less and we cause less suffering ourselves. Challenging to do. Now, I brought both of these examples for you because there are stereotypes out there about various religions. For example, I think there's a stereotype about Buddhists that they're more peaceful and wise and centered and, don't react to things negatively in the world, that they're the really cool people. And that Christians are trying to be perfect, but that we are hypocrites. That the story out there about hypocrites that you'll hear all the time is that the reason I'm not Christian is that Christians don't act Christian. Gandhi said that. He said, I think Christianity's great. If I could find anybody who's actually acting Christian, I'd be one. He said that. Well, in my experience of humanity, of people of all religions and no religion, everybody's sort of in the same boat in terms of struggling with human ego and vanity. But this is what I love about Christianity. There is that person, Jesus, who is there modeling the compassion for us, continually being present to us not only in our scriptures but in our lives through how we behave to one another, through how Jesus responds to us in prayer, and giving us that message of compassion so that whenever the poisonous moment comes up in our head or in our actions, Jesus is there modeling the forgiveness and the compassion, reminding us that we are good people. That doesn't mean everything we do is good. Doesn't mean we're ever going to attain perfection, and it doesn't matter. Remember the rich young man, one of his things was that he wanted to be perfect. I have followed every commandment since my youth. Right. that you have. If we can just have more compassion with ourselves, because Jesus is compassionate towards us, because Jesus is merciful towards us, if we believe that, accept that forgiveness from him, we move on from ourselves and from what other people have done to us. The other thing I love about this, the Christian part of it, is that we have a built-in communal practice. I don't know of any other religion that emphasizes the community of people as much as Christianity. And this is great for two reasons. We sustain one another. How many of you have experienced when you're going through a rough time that another member of the church has helped you through it? Yeah, everybody. And how many of you have experienced a challenge that made you want to quit church because somebody was so annoying? Yeah. So, that is the advantage of church. It gives us a working group to work with, but it also gives us a safe place to be to work about this. And a lot of people think like they'll say, oh, Ginny, I love church, but I'll never be on a committee again because those other people. And I think, yeah, but it's actually the other people who teach us this, who teach us how to move past the annoyance, who teach us to be compassionate with the people who are being annoying and to be compassionate with ourselves for being annoyed. Pema Chodron tells a story of some retreat center where there was a super annoying person, and everybody hated this person and talked about how much they hated this person at this Buddhist retreat center. And the retreat leader kept making them do things, I don't know, like annoying things. One of them was cut the sod in squares and just move it to another place on the property. And the super annoying person got annoyed, really annoyed, and just left. And everybody was glad that Mr. Annoying Person left, and they told the leader, and he said, oh no, and got in his car and ran off and came back 3 days later with this person, Mr. Annoyance. And everybody said, why did you bring back Mr. Annoying Guy? And he said, I actually pay him to be here, to be annoying, to teach people to get over it. You are paying me to be here, so I'll be, if you want me, I'll be annoying for you, but I already am pretty annoying. I hadn't thought of that, actually. Yes, but I did want to say that practicing the self-sacrifice, giving up our ego as opposed to giving up ourself, is not the same thing as wiping out ourselves. So, you have to make a distinction between giving away to somebody who's being annoying, being self-sacrificing in that sense, forgiving others, being compassionate about your own reaction to people, and letting people abuse you, letting people walk all over you. Now, it might look like Jesus is being abused, and he was in a way, but it was an abuse that was intended, that was planned, that he knew was coming and accepted because it had a purpose. So what Thomas Keating says is that if you are taking on some sacrifice or some pain because of the actions of another, you're doing it with a purpose of furthering the kingdom of heaven. I'll give you an example of the difference between the two. I'm in a former workplace where my coworkers were annoying. These are both high-tech jobs. It's not a church job. And yet, I sensed that rather than running from the place, I could learn something from staying rather than running from the super annoying person who was playing political games that might get me laid off. I endured it for about 3 years. It was like 5 years at this company, the last 3 years with this going on. And I learned something from staying in that moment. She wasn't abusing me. She was politicking behind the scenes, and I watched one employee after another getting taken down. I went, wow, I'm going to be soon. It's going to happen soon. But I learned something from staying. I gained fortitude. I actually learned to forgive that person. It took me a while, actually, but I learned to forgive that person. Scenario number 2. The boss in this small company was verbally abusive towards everybody, but most especially towards me, and was having me work insane hours, like you need to wake up at 2 in the morning and interview somebody in Thailand. And I was a single mother of a 5-year-old. And after only 2 months at this job, I said, this job is running me into the ground, and I'm being verbally abused, and so are the other employees. And so I exited the job without even another job to go to. I said, I will not take this anymore. The difference is, if you are being abused and there is an abuser in the situation, or somebody who's just, really behaving inappropriately, removing yourself from the situation is an act of compassion both towards yourself and that other person. It was compassionate to myself and probably my daughter for me to leave that job knowing that I did not yet have another one. It was the right thing to do for my well-being, not to get back at him, but for my well-being. And it was the right thing for him to stop what he was doing to me. I don't know whether he learned something from it. We've never spoken again. It was many years ago. But I learned something, that you don't stay in a situation like that that is damaging to you. It was no way furthering the kingdom of heaven for me to stay in that job. But in the first job I was describing, it did further the kingdom of heaven because I learned not to run from conflict, but to endure it and to feel compassion towards the person that I believed to be the cause of it. May not have been. I may have been part of it as well. Do you see the difference between abuse and enduring something in a sense of self-sacrifice? It takes discernment on your part to know the difference. It takes significant discernment on your part. And I would argue again that in the Christian tradition, we get that discernment from praying for help with whatever the situation is, for asking for the Jesus help, but also in having a community of people who have endured the exact same type of things and can sit with you in discernment and can offer you that wisdom. What we gain if we are able to do this work, if we are able to go in silence and look at the various poisons in our life and turn them into medicines, take that negativity and somehow learn from it and be healed from it, is that we learn how to be our real self, our best self, not the false self, also known as the ego. There's a fly by my ear. Now, some people will say, well, what do you mean by the real self versus the false self? That's a good question. But most of the things that we strive after, that we worry about from the past, or angry about from the past, or hope for in the future, most of those things are not real. The conflict you had with somebody, it's gone 10 years ago. Let it go. Not real. But what is real is you, the child of God, working through that conflict, feeling pain, and saying, how can I get to a new place about this? Another way to think about this is what the German Swiss theologian Karl Barth said. He said, sin is no thing or nothing. Julian of Norwich said it too. Sin is no thing. That thing that happened to you, it's no thing anymore. It's gone. That snippy comment somebody made in a committee meeting, is it still bothering you? It's gone. You can choose to be past it. It's just a thought in your head. It's no thing. And when we can get past all those apparent slings and arrows that have damaged us and get to what is whole inside of us, we begin to experience the real self that Jesus is. He was all real self. He did not have the same struggles that we did. But what he did have in the priesthood described in Hebrews was a human nature. He knew what we were going through. And so he had complete compassion towards us in our struggles. The more that we can do that, have compassion for ourselves and then others who we see struggling in the same way, the more that we can be our real self and models of the Christ that we are asked to be. Amen.